Whoops. Hey, hello, Patrick. You can hear me.
I do.
Got a very Bob Barker situation here, which is great because we are coming from the TV world. I just wanted to introduce Patrick Donaghue. From the UX perspective, the work that Patrick's done, particularly with the television UI design, and the technology behind it, as well as the actual user experiences and the business rationale behind new products and services. He's been at the forefront of it for, well, I don't want to say how long, but he's got more than one Emmy Award. He's been nominated for multiple Emmy Awards on top of the ones he's won. He's got enough patents to fill a wall. But most importantly, he's a really amazing guy. He's a great professional, and he's a great connection that I want to share with you all here at University of Wisconsin. And if he needed sort of a plaque for every cool thing he's done for everyone in the industry, I don't think he'd have any room left in his house. So I just wanted to. He's got a small presentation he wants to make, and then we'll do some Q&A. And I encourage you to ask some questions because he's going to be hopefully addressing some of the questions you may have just about sort of UX in general, and in particular your portfolios and that work. So Patrick, let's see if all this audio is working.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sounds great.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. You're very kind, and we've been friends and colleagues for, gosh, I don't know. It's been a long time, 20 years at least. So lots of nice things to say about you and the work you've done, and appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to all your students. So hopefully we'll make it interesting for you guys, and I can share some of my experiences and hopefully help you guys be successful. So let me see if I can share this PowerPoint. Let's see if this works. All right, are you able to see that?
Looks good.
Okay, good. All right, so yeah, what Brendan told me was he told me a lot about you guys as students, about your backgrounds, about I think where your kind of career aspirations are, and I'm thrilled that you guys are kind of pursuing this career in the UX design. It's something that I've been doing really since before it was really even called UX, and it's been called a lot of things over the years. But in the early days, I started doing design for various devices before the internet, before the web. So I go back a long way. Just a little quick background on me. So yeah, I've won 3 Emmy Awards for work primarily in interactive television. So a lot of the work that we did in the early days was designing interfaces for TVs. So how you find movies, order things, play games. I built some game services on TV and things like that. Also received a number of US patents for different, primarily user experience projects. So inventing new ways for people to find movies, TV shows, information. So, some very technical, some more visual. I also worked for over 20 years in the US telecom industry, so mostly working at US cable companies. So in that time, as the industry kind of grew, I was able to expand. So I was responsible for many of the websites, mobile applications. So I've been able to really either myself design or actually manage a team of UX designers for pretty much every form factor you can think of. Did some early work with voice control and gesture controls with hand tracking and things like that. So really had some amazing opportunities, and all that is UX. I think nowadays when you talk about UX, people are pretty much talking about websites and mobile applications, but hopefully as you guys move in your career, you'll find new opportunities to, really affect the user experience, which is what that's all about. And then finally, in the last 5 or 6 years, I have transitioned into being a producer of XR, VR, augmented reality, things like that. So the image on the lower right is a game that I produced a few years ago and called Life Hutch, and that was a full sort of immersive story experience. I've done some others, and actually have done some business applications using augmented reality as well, which can be very interesting from a UX perspective, just, knowing that you've got a different environment where people are using their hands and they're moving in three-dimensional space, and it's actually, I think, pretty involved. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is how I would typically interact with someone like yourself. So, I'm often putting together projects and I'm often looking for help. I have a stable of people that I use with different skill sets, and you try to use the people that you've worked with in the past because you can depend on them. They're good at what they do. But the way the world works these days, people are freelancers, they're working on multiple projects, and so I'm always looking for new people. And just in the last year, I've hired concept designers, UX designers, 3D artists, more traditional sort of project managers, scrum masters, all those types of roles, and often work with teams from around the world. Right now I'm doing an augmented reality project where team members are in Pakistan, Poland, Ukraine, Republic of Georgia, myself in New York, another team member in Colorado, and the client's actually in Montana. So we almost entirely cover the globe with our team on that job. So anyway, well, the reason I bring that up is I want to explain to you kind of how my process works when I'm looking for people, and hopefully this will help you understand, as you're trying to promote yourselves and get your portfolio out there, how you can be successful. So what I like to do is I'm always really clear about what I'm looking for. Not all clients are going to be this way, but having done this for many, many years, I'm very clear about here's the scope of my project. And then I'll often specify which tools, if it matters. I think what I've heard is you guys are all very well versed in Figma. Figma, is by far the most, I think, common tool out there these days, and a great tool. So that's usually what UX people are using these days. And so, if we're doing a job and we require somebody who has knowledge of a specific tool, we use lots of different tools like Lucid Charts for flow charts and things like that, but that can be a factor. And then also what platforms. For instance, virtual reality is pretty unique. And so if I'm doing a virtual reality job, I'm going to try to find someone who has some experience with that. Now you're all smart and you can learn a new platform just like, any of us can, but it's certainly nice to know if someone's already worked on it. I ran into this a lot with augmented reality where, in fact, Brendan, I feel like you even helped me find some people for that. It was really hard to find people who understood how to make three-dimensional user interfaces. So then I look for people, and we can go into this in a little bit more depth, but portfolio sites that I typically will search is ArtStation, if you're familiar with that. Behance is another one I can talk a little bit about. I'm a little sketchy on Behance sometimes. And Dribble is another one that we can talk about. I also ask for referrals. As I mentioned, I was looking for people to handle this one AR job, and I put the word out on LinkedIn. I need people, I need these certain skill sets and all that. That's often a way that I find people. And then I will do web searches if I'm just looking for, a very specific skill set. So those are all ways that someone like myself might find you. And if I'm trying to hire someone like yourselves, that would be a way in which I would go about that. Next to me, I'm very focused on work samples. I want to actually interact with them as possible. So, you know, as soon as I identify a candidate for a job, I'm going to want to see the work, and the sort of the presentations that I typically see where they sort of do the case studies and they talk about all the things you learn in school are great, but I actually want to, if possible, touch it, feel it, interact with it, and really get a sense of sort of the elegance and the simplicity and effectiveness of a user experience. So something to keep in mind as you're going through this is, you know, how can you best present the work you do so that someone can really appreciate it and understand it. The other thing I want to mention, which you may run into, is and one of the reasons I'm not as big of a fan of Behance, which if you're not familiar with Behance, it's an Adobe artist portfolio service. It's free and it's pretty good. I have had a couple of pretty bad experiences on there where designers are showing work that's not theirs and basically lying about it. And I've actually, unfortunately, hired a couple of artists who were just not qualified to do the work. And it was not necessarily pleasant having to fire people and try to get your money back from them. So just keep in mind that if you're a producer like myself, one of the things I'm going to be very focused on is being confident that you're showing me your work. And I do this all the time. I'll interview people, usually over a Zoom call, and I'll ask them to take me through an example of something that they've built in their portfolio. And I'll ask very specific questions about how they built it, and why they built it, things like that. And it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly if someone hasn't actually done the work. And this unfortunately happens a lot. So just so you know, as you're building your portfolio and you're meeting with people, make sure you've got a way to prove that it's actually your work and your vision. And then, yeah, finally, I'll set up a Zoom call typically because people are all over the world at this point. I'll do my best to verify that they are who they say they are, and they can talk about the work they've done. I'll ask for a lot of specifics. And then I will confirm language and time zone compatibility. And this has become so important because it really is a sort of a, you know, an international workforce these days. And, you know, as I mentioned, I have this one job where I have a team of, I don't know, with the developers, I think it's about 12 people scattered all around the world. For that job, everyone is using English, but that's not always the case. And so we're often trying to figure out, you know, how we handle time zones, which can be very challenging. I think there's 12-hour difference between the client in Montana and some of our people in Eastern Europe. And so those are just practical things, which is if I'm going to work with someone, we all have to be able to communicate and get on calls and things. I know that's a lot. So maybe before I go forward, I'm just curious, are there any questions or reactions to any of that? Does that make sense? I'd love, yeah, if there's any sort of thoughts, I'd love to hear and you know, because I'm here to help you guys. So I really want to be a resource for you.
First you say, hi, I'm Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, first you just like introduce yourself in the very beginning. And I would like to know what made you decide to transfer your career from original is the software and apps UI UX design, and then you change your category into VR and XR, MR, augmented reality field. What made you make this decision?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. The thing about my career is I've always been on the innovation side. So I am most comfortable working in technologies that are not mainstream yet. So when I started working in cable television in the mid 1990s, none of these things like the interfaces you see on Netflix and Hulu and Disney, none of that existed. And so in the early days of doing that work, it was a very exciting time because we really could do anything other than the sort of limitations of the hardware platform. And so over the years, I've moved into mobile and other technologies as they have become available. And to be honest, cable TV and TV interface really wasn't that interesting anymore. And so I find VR and AR and XR to be, much more sort of new and fresh and innovative. And so for me, as someone who likes to always work on the latest and greatest things, including AI, quite frankly, it's really just been me following my passion as a designer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
This is Professor Jackson, he teaches the course here where you're speaking, so I forgot to introduce you at the beginning.
Hi.
Hey, how are you, Patrick? So I'm wondering, it seems like from your description of who you're looking for, a lot of them seem to be specialists in different areas. For a lot of folks who are just getting started, they may be more generalists, so doing UX research, maybe mocking designs, prototyping. I'm wondering, how does someone communicate? I guess, how do you see the difference in whether people need to be a specialist in one or multiple areas?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I used to have a research team, UX research team that reported to me, and that was just an incredible group and such a great way to test UX and also, quite frankly, solve any debates people have, because often, design and UX debates can become very subjective. I like blue, I like this, whatever. And I always found the research aspect to be incredibly helpful because the numbers don't lie. And so even when, if a big shot executive tells you he wants it a certain way, at least you've got, data to back up, what the right solution is. To your question about sort of generalists, I think because I grew up in this industry, I personally understand that people can have different skill sets. So, I can look at somebody's portfolio and see that they do beautiful traditional design or even artwork, but can also be very talented as a UX professional. So for me, I don't mind seeing the range of work. I'm probably a little more open-minded than a lot of people in that regard, because I think traditionally, if most people are hiring managers, they're saying, they're on their list and they say, okay, I need a UX guy and I need to know Figma. And, they sort of commoditize those people. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think as much as you can be really clear what your skill sets are and what type of work you want to do, that's going to make it easier for me or people like me to kind of, decide if that's someone I want to talk to.
So, well, if anyone has some more questions, please continue to think of them. I wanted to add something, Patrick. One of the early part of the lecture before you popped in here was about personas. And that whole role of personas in developing products and informing products and services and even features, right? This button need to be there, can it be buried in some submenu? So maybe to kind of put some granularity on it, how would you advise students that have projects and have put a lot of time and effort into doing things like the laying the groundwork like personas and some mapping? What's the best way to present that kind of work versus maybe some of the other work if they gravitate towards those other types of more eye-catching or design type work?
Yeah, no problem. So a few things I would say on that, and you're probably familiar with these, but there are some great portfolio sites out there. They're, I think, all free. So again, Dribble is a really good one. ArtStation is a really good one. Behance is a good service, aside from my own issues with it. And they all allow artists like yourselves to do exactly what you're describing. You can upload case studies. You can provide sort of the framework in terms of your process, your UX process, and these are really valuable things to show. So there's no doubt that any opportunity you have to show everything, like you say, from personas to even journey mapping, if you guys do journey mapping at all, any of your sort of A/B testing, even data in terms of, what we were mentioning before about UX research. So anything that you can share that sort of can illustrate how you've done A/B testing, how you've done user focus group testing, how you've done, I don't know if you guys do things like eye tracking or any of those types of things, or if you've got some of these tests packages that allow you to really track like where the person is clicking on the screen, any of that type of stuff that you can share with a prospective customer or a client is really valuable, because it just shows that you're much more skilled, much more educated. It has unfortunately become the case that because UX is much easier to do now, in terms of you've got this incredible tools available, that I think a lot of people call themselves UX artists, and they're not people like yourself who have an advanced degree and who are much more technically savvy. So I think if you can provide all that next level of detail, you're going to stand out from a guy who just, took a course in Figma, did a couple of mock-ups, and then decided to call himself a UX designer. So yeah, I think all those things, if you can share them and make them available, it helps kind of round out who you are. It validates that you're a real professional, and also gives you a story to tell about how your design is your process works, how user-centric you are, how you're focused on sort of goal, task completion and goals and things like that. So yeah, I would say, yeah, as much as that as the students can provide is really good.
Here's a question here in the back.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I have a question. Like, if you view a portfolio, what kind of content or features do you believe is the most important for you want to understand that user?
For sure. Yeah, again, tool sets that, software packages that you're familiar with, the types of end user experiences that you work on. So again, mobile, web, AR, VR, there's lots of different types of UX work. You guys probably know, like in the automotive industry, there's a lot of UX work that can be done in heads-up displays and controls in cars. So, I think if you can show the tools that you use and the types of platforms that you typically design for, that's really helpful, because that will allow me to very quickly, if I have a very specific need, I'll be able, if I, like on the job I'm working on, I needed a Figma person who had worked with a Microsoft HoloLens, which is a very specific mixed reality headset. And it was very difficult to find someone. And so when I saw somebody with those skills, I immediately contacted them, because that was exactly what I needed. So after that, I would say a case study that, as we talked about, shows the entire process from the very beginning of your personas and kind of what the goals were for the project, what your sort of KPIs are in terms of, what were your success criteria and those types of things. That's always a good way to ground the project, so that when people see the design, it has some context and they understand that what the project was about. And then they can look at it, instead of just, is it pretty and do I like the drop downs, they can really look at it and see, is the UX actually effective? And it's a little different. The UX is more design than art, so it's really there to serve a purpose, which is to help people do things, complete tasks, and so it's it's measurable, and I think it can be evaluated on that level. So so I think anything that can illustrate your process, like I mentioned, I think anything, if you are able to launch anything to real customers or even focus groups, I think any data about usage, utilization, those types of things can be very helpful. It's tough when you're a student, because you haven't necessarily launched as many things, but it does really help if you can show any kind of real world data about usage. And then for me, as I might have mentioned, I really like to be able to interact with your work. So again, whether you're using Figma or XD or a lot of these tools, any of these sort of rapid prototyping tools, I recommend you provide a link so people can actually interact with your work. And it doesn't have to be the final product that's maybe been deployed, But again, if you can create a clickable prototype through one of the tools that are out there, I think that's really valuable. Those would be the main things I think for me. I guess the only other thing I would say is I would show some range. One of the things I find, because I look at a lot of these portfolios, is they all tend to look the same after a while, especially, the people who've only been out of school for a year or so. They tend to have very similar portfolios because they've all basically taken their coursework and they've, turned it into a portfolio, which makes sense. That's what I did when I was your age. But they tend to all look the same. And after I go through, 20 or 30 of these, honestly, they all kind of blur together. So I would say if you can show some diversity in your work and show some different types of experiences, that's just going to help you stand out.
Patrick, I know you have some more, some things you want to show. That was just some quick questions, right?
Yeah.
While you're sort of thinking about that, I just wanted to jump in and take an opportunity to ask what advice you'd give for the students. You alluded to it, they're students, they're here to learn. It's a very high-paced program. So if you can offer any advice to them on how to sort of hack this long arcing production cycle, that they're sort of going through, in particular with group projects, and really how to untangle their work out of a group project, and then also maybe how they can hack this longer arcing production cycle.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know we spoke about this the other day, and I think what I understand from this program and other programs, oftentimes you're working in, like you say, group projects, 3 or 4 people. And so that's tricky because then you want to be able to use that work in your portfolio and it's not entirely your work. I mean, the simple answer is, I think it's worth your time to invest in a project of your own that may be fictitious, may be, not real, and build out something. And the advantage of doing that is you can pick whatever subject matter you like, and you can do something that you really feel strongly about, and you can design basically something entirely speculative, but you can design something exactly the way you want it. So, I like doing that a lot. I think it's a good way to showcase your own work. Alternatively, you do have to be really transparent and make sure you're really clear that when you're showing work that's group work, that it wasn't done solely by you. Again, because it becomes obvious when I interview people and I can tell parts of things they don't really know how they work. And once I get the sense that somebody's not being truthful about the work, I'm pretty much done talking to them.
That's great. That's some good advice. So go on to the next phase here. I know you have some things you'd like to share with the students. That's been great so far. And guys, if you want to think of some questions in the meantime, you'll have more opportunities for questions.
Sure. Let me pull up some more stuff here. All right. So we talked a little bit about some of these sites. I'm familiar. I'm actually just curious, and I know you're sort of at the beginning of your career, and I don't know if I'll be able to see everyone's hands, but are people familiar with sites like Dribble and ArtStation and things like that? And if you are, have you been putting any of your work on them?
Yeah. Just a show of hands if you're familiar with the sites. I would say about 40%, 50%.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, ArtStation in particular was not an obvious one. I initially started using ArtStation to find concept designers, 3D artists, and things like that. As you may know, that site has been now purchased by Epic, which is the maker of the Unreal Engine. So it's become a really powerful destination for artists to showcase their work, and that includes UX people. So it's one of the places I definitely go to, and go to it a lot. And you can also subscribe to people. So if there's artists that I like their work, you can subscribe to them and get updates as they post new things. These other sites are similar. Dribble is also another one, very popular, very easy to use, allows you to upload your materials, and pretty flexible in terms of what you can do. And quite frankly, there's no reason you couldn't be on more than one of these. You know, it is work to build these and maintain them, but it is, I think, it's a really powerful way to get your work out there. You know, assuming you're going to be freelancer, or even if you're looking for a full-time job, you know, you need a destination, a place where you can showcase your work, and these are nice because they will rotate through work, and you can also get feedback from people. I know the Behance site in particular, as you do projects for people, I'm thinking more as freelancers, the people I've hired, they'll often ask me for, you know, to give them feedback on the site. So, you know, you'll give somebody a recommendation, and that's part of how you evaluate, you know, which artists you might want to use, just like on eBay or anywhere else. You know, you look at the seller's reputation. And so I remember Behance in particular, that was a valuable feature. And I had a couple of artists that I hired through there ask me to give them recommendations. So that, you know, that can be a really nice way to, again, just kind of build your network and build some of your credibility. You know, I guess along those lines, I want to talk a little bit about portfolio websites. You know, I think most people at this point, you know, if you're a professional, either looking for work, or if you're, you know, a freelance contract worker, I think it's still worthwhile to have a website. I know that it's not maybe as important as it once was, but, you know, these sites in particular, I find to be really powerful because in the case of UX Folio in particular, that is a tool that is designed specifically to allow you to create a UX portfolio. So that's really nice. It's really easy to use. I actually built one for myself earlier today because I hadn't tried it in a while. And I would say within an hour, you could have a pretty great portfolio website up. I believe you can get a custom domain if you want to register a domain. Like I have patrickdonaghue.net is one of the domains I own. So that can be a really nice way to kind of, again, just get your name out there and get your brand out there. But these are also all available for free. So if you don't have a lot of money, they will allow you to create free portfolio websites. And, you know, you won't have a custom URL. So it'll be xfolio.com/whatever, but at least you have a destination out there. If people are searching, as long as you build your site properly and you put the proper metadata, proper tags, proper keywords throughout your work, you know, it's going to be a good way to drive traffic to you. Another area I would just talk a little bit about in terms of self-promotion, LinkedIn is huge. Another place I look for people, and I also will see posts from people. And so this is a great way, if people are sharing your work, it's a great way for you to get your name out there. And I really recommend that you not only create a LinkedIn profile, but that you populate it with your work. You know, I know it sounds like a lot that you're sort of maintaining multiple destinations to promote yourself, but the more you can put your name and your work out there, you're just more likely to get projects, or to, you know, have a recruiter contact you for full-time work. So I think LinkedIn is really powerful for that. Instagram is tricky. It really depends on the type of work you're doing. It obviously is a more visual kind of a platform. So if it's sort of more nuts and bolts UX work that maybe isn't as visually exciting, maybe not. Instagram is not a great choice. But again, I follow a number of people in the sort of XR space who are doing really innovative work, and they're often posting their work, which is exciting. And also immediately when I have a project, I think, oh, I know the guy who could do that. For example, with the new Meta Quest 3 headset, which just got released about a month ago, it allows you to sort of create a 3D mesh of your environment, and then you can create interactive elements that interact with the real world. And it's something that a lot of people are experimenting with. And so I'm regularly seeing people who are creating new types of interactive experiences, posting videos and things. So depends on, again, the type of work you're doing and the type of work you're looking for. The other one, if you're not familiar with it, is Linktree. And this is important because of, I think what I've been telling you for a while is you may have your work in 5 or 6 different places. And it can be sometimes hard for people to find you or to know where to go to find you. So a link tree is there's a couple of these out there, but it's a simple service that allows you to basically create a page of here's all the places you can find me and the work I do. So, I think the common sort of thread through everything I'm telling you here is it's really important that you be out there, that if you do good work, which I'm assuming everyone here, you're in this program, it means you're actually very good at what you do, that you don't miss an opportunity to put yourself and to put your work out there, so that it can be discovered. So people like myself who are searching for it can find you easily. And because no matter how good your work is, if I don't know you exist and I can't find you, it doesn't really matter. So I think this may be an area that maybe people don't put in as much time into because they're more focused on the work, but you have to make sure that people can discover it and find it, and get access to it. I don't know if you're in your program, do you talk about that, Brendan, in terms of how people should be marketing themselves or making their work available and sort of that aspect of the process?
Oh, I absolutely talk about it. They were exposed to it in orientation, and as I said, it's a fast-moving program, and they want to excel in the classroom. It's a great school. It's a great program. But I'd like to take the time, of course, to say, come see me and let's talk about some of the things you can do. It's really called growth hacking. And it's marketing yourself, selling yourself. And we do that, and I do advise them on some of those strategies, and it can get very granular in terms of how to defeat or rather compete with some of these ATS systems, that are out there. Again, Patrick is a very open-minded, manager, and he's able to sort of spot the kind of talent he needs for the project at the moment. But Patrick, a lot of these young UX designers, they're trying to build their networks at the same time. They're trying to, sort of put a new facet onto their skills or to level up their skills. And maybe if you can just talk about this sort of this idea, I know we spoke about it, about the minimally viable portfolio and having something to network with. So, that is the idea of asking someone, hey, what do you think about my portfolio, or what do you think about this work, or perhaps critiquing a piece of software, and then you run into someone from that company and they share your opinion on that critique, and then now you're having a conversation. If you could just talk a little bit about how they can sort of hack their own growth and get those doors open for themselves that way.
For sure. It's interesting. I mean, one of the challenges I have is some of my best work I'm not able to show people because I'm doing it for a client, and it kills me that and that's the nature of how the work is. You get paid to do a project, they own the materials, and some clients will allow you to share some or all of it. Again, the work I do tends to be sort of leading edge work that they aren't necessarily ready to expose to the general public. So for me, it can be tricky because usually my best work is things you can't see until 2 or 3 years down the road, which is another reason why if you do a personal project strictly as a showcase piece for yourself, you own it as long as you're not using IP from Marvel Comics, Disney, whomever, Hello Kitty. You can promote your work. So that's another good reason to kind of build, these kind of speculative sites. In terms of this idea of sort of the MVP prototype or portfolio, I think it's really interesting. Definitely less is more. Again, someone like myself, I may look at 30 or 40 people's work, and then I might identify, say, 3 to 5 that I actually want to speak to. So just like in UX, and you're designing with the user in mind, keep in mind that someone like myself, I'm looking at lots and lots of portfolio materials, so it does have to be concise. I'd rather see 2 or 3 really good projects than 10 projects that are more or less the same. So I would focus on a very concise, diverse, high quality, focused presentation. Because truthfully, I can tell pretty quickly if someone is good enough just by the work. And so I want to get to that work as quickly as possible. So, don't feel that you have to build out this massive presence on the web or on any of these sites. Just I think as quickly as you can get up some really good work and get it out there. You bring up some interesting points about the networking concepts, and I've definitely done that type of work where you'll go in and analyze other products, you'll analyze other services, you'll become sort of a pundit. It is actually an interesting way to get a lot of traffic, and I follow certain people, I guess you'd call them influencers, but it's more in the nerd space. So I'm definitely following people, mostly on LinkedIn and Instagram, who are doing really interesting work, and also again, evaluating new products as they come out, giving us commentary and feedback. So it's not such a terrible way to again, be out there, stay, current in people's mind. And so I think those are all really good. The only thing I would caution is if you're going to be critical of someone else's work, just be prepared that you may run into them one day, or some hiring manager may pull up your criticism of Adobe or Google or some other thing. So just be careful about how you approach that.
Right, that's good advice. At least provide a solution. If you're gonna complain about something, provide a solution to that. Any other questions out there? I know I have a couple questions teed up from the UX students that I've met. I've got sort of a, I'm ready to play the hits that they say to me when they come to my office. But I absolutely want to give the students here in this class the opportunity to ask Patrick any question you'd like, because he's really got tons of experience and he can really help you out. And I've been to a number of these things as a student, and you never know what's gonna catch. Something's gonna you're exposed to something that could completely change how you approach things. Yep, right here.
Yeah, so this is more about like your work with like the VR, XR, AR stuff, but I was just curious, like, what are some of like the greatest challenges that you face with like, designing and producing that kind of work?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting space, and I like doing new stuff where it's sort of there are no rules, so it makes it a lot harder. But no, it's really interesting. I mean, one of the things we struggle with, like in the first game I did, was how do you get people to look where you want them to look and go where you want them to go? I mean, we're so used to, I'm staring at a screen, I'm looking at Amazon website, whatever, I'm sort of doing whatever task it is I'm doing. And especially in sort of immersive storytelling and things like that, you have some interesting questions and interesting challenges, such as if I'm trying to get you to a certain location, I'm trying to get you to interact with something, how do I do that? And what we ended up doing actually is going back to theme park design, which became really important for us because there's actually a lot of good work that's been done in this field in terms of and filmmaking too, but how do I get you to look where I want you to look and to do what I want you to do? And I use a combination of sounds and animation and movement and things to draw people's attention. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that we've had to invent. Just like filmmakers, when they cut to a close-up of something, they do that for a reason. Well, in a sort of a virtual space, I can't cut to a close-up of whatever the thing is that I need you to look at. So I have to figure out other ways to make it glow, make it flash, sparkle, whatever, sound come out of it, things like that, which was really interesting. The other challenge on a more of a UX front is just all the sort of UX mechanisms that we are all familiar with every day are kind of different because now they're three-dimensional. It's from simple things like if I have a 3D menu floating in front of me and I turn my head in VR, well, is the menu coming with me or is it staying over here? How am I pressing buttons? What type of feedback am I getting? This concept of sort of hover states and things that you deal with in web applications are very different. One of the challenges I had recently, this one project I'm working on is an augmented reality project. It's for the auto industry. And so in this case, they wanted us to show how to basically disassemble an entire car. And so they had this virtual car kind of floating in space. And the idea was, how could I remove components from the car, be able to reorient the car, turn it this way and that, pull different components out, And a lot of those sort of mechanisms to do that sort of exist in the 3D modeling world, but it required a, how do we make this easy for a car mechanic to understand that, I can grab this virtual car, I can turn it upside down, I can remove the muffler, and I can place it over here. And how do I, on a UX level, specify, well, which things are you able to pick up? And, all those visual cues that a good UX designer will do, which is to help people anticipate how things work so that they can be successful in the tasks that they're trying to accomplish. So there's not a lot of sort of standard paradigms for those things. So, you find if you're doing those types of XR projects, you're really inventing a lot, and you have to be very focused on being very user-centric in your design sort of process. So it's a great challenge. If it's an area that you're interested in, if any you're interested in, I would definitely recommend spending some time in it. There's some great tools like Shapes XR in particular is a really good tool for rapid VR, sort of 3D prototyping, which would be really interesting. There's a couple others, but that's probably one of my favorites.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so now people are using ChatGPT. So do you, in what kind of scenario do you think that tool is helpful for your position as a UX designer?
Well, that's a good question. I can tell you one project I'm working on is creating a virtual agent, like a virtual ambassador. So a client wants me to build a virtual human, basically, that will speak intelligently about their product. So we're actually, I don't know if you've read, but OpenAI, I think last week, announced that you could create GPTs, which are little sort of agents that you can train on how they respond and things like that. So there is something there that you can start experimenting with, making these agents. Actually, Microsoft just announced something similar this week as well. I think the other thing that's important for UX designers is understanding how, whether it's ChatGPT or any of the other AI tools, will influence the work you do. And I guess on two levels, how much will AI help you design sites? Because as you probably know, there's already sites out there today that if you type in what I want to build a website that does the following things, it will actually create HTML code for you. So that's already sort of starting to happen on a basic level. But I think the question is, as a UX designer, how it will change the way in which you design things. An example for me from the televisions, back when I used to design for television, is it was very difficult. It was a very low resolution screen, and sometimes I would have 1,000 movies that I needed to make available to a customer. And so even in those days, what we would do is use artificial intelligence and machine learning to make sure that recommendation engines are always pushing the best titles to the top of the list, because no one's going to scroll down 20, 30 pages. So I think the same thing applies to sort of modern UX design. Is I think you're going to have to understand AI, because the interfaces themselves will become more intelligent, and they will be able to anticipate the customer need more. And I think those interactions will be much more consultative and less of a kind of a traditional sort of website where you sort of, click on this option and I want 2 of these and I want this quantity and I want this model, and that sort of very traditional sort of web UX. I think is going to change pretty dramatically in the next, say, 3 to 5 years.
Any other questions? I have a question here if people want some time to think about one more. We had talked about the tools, and as you said, it's sort of very sort of tool driven, and it's sort of like a shopping list with particularly these applicant tracking systems, right? And you even mentioned coming up in the search ranks, but you got to put in the proper metadata and tags. I'm interested in your thoughts about the tools maybe influencing design too much. I know you alluded to it yesterday the other day when we talked a little bit about it, and I think you sort of touched on it with AI, and you know, talking about interfaces being affected by AI and being, as you say, consultative and custom, much like everyone's Photoshop setup is their own Photoshop setup, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just interested in anything you can provide in terms of advice about the really separating the tools and what the tools can do and what you really want to accomplish as a designer.
Yeah, no, that's a great topic for a couple reasons. I think especially as it relates to the students. So Figma, let's just say, because that's the industry standard, Figma it's a spectacular tool, and I wish we'd had it years ago. It allows you to work very, very quickly and use a lot of sort of standards with all the different toolkits that are available. Whether it's Google or Apple or anybody else's design libraries, and so you can very, very quickly build websites, mobile apps, all that, and that's fantastic. I think where you have to be careful is that all the work starts to look like everybody else's work. And that can be a problem, again, from just a fatigue standpoint. If I'm looking at lots of portfolios and everybody's more or less doing the same type of thing, it's fine, and I can look and go, okay, this guy knows how to use Figma, or this woman knows how to use Figma, but it doesn't show me a lot of originality. And it also just, again, I'll get fatigued. I'll look at a bunch of these sites and I'm kind of like, they all blend together after a while, because they're all kind of the same. They all have a vertical nav. They've all got, the same sort of radio buttons set up, and, same sort of all the UX mechanisms that we use every day. So I think it's a dangerous thing. It's great because it's so powerful and it's so easy to use and it's so fast to build websites, but I would really caution people about that, especially when you're trying to differentiate yourself as an artist, to do something different, which oftentimes means you have to design more, you have to build more elements, you have to think about new ways of displaying information, which can be really challenging because, this is a pretty advanced and sort of sophisticated practice that you guys are in. And there's a lot of great work that's been done in UX that you can take advantage of, but it can be dangerous to rely so heavily on these tools, because it'll make it hard for you to stand out. I'm writing a piece right now about sort of the philosophy of user experience. And, if we understand, we keep in mind that, UX is really, it's to help people complete a task, to do something, right? Whatever that is. It could be play a game, it could be order a t-shirt on Amazon, but it's really meant to help you accomplish a task. And so I've been sort of toying with this notion of, I like to make things different. So every time I design something, I like to make sure it's unique and special and unusual. And the downside of that is usability can be tricky, because people know how things work, because everything kind of works the same way. And so how do you strike that balance between doing something innovative and new and fresh, but also not being so unique that it can be confusing? The example I use a lot is a steering wheel in a car, and pretty much every car you get into has the same type of steering wheel. And the wonderful thing about that is you can get into any car pretty much anywhere in the world, and depending on which side of the car it's on, you can just get in and drive, and that's amazing, right? And that's the usability aspect of it, which is really powerful. But I think if you step back a little bit and you think about it, it's like, well, the steering wheel, if the goal is I want to drive a car, sure, the steering wheel is a good answer. But if the goal is I want to get somewhere, maybe I don't need a steering wheel at all. And I think that's where we're getting with self-driving cars, is steering wheel is there because I need a way to control the car. But if you think more broadly about what the actual user intention is and what the actual user goal is, it's oftentimes not what it seems to be. And so, as you're designing things, I think, again, these tools will make it very easy for you to do the sort of traditional and more obvious ways of designing things. But I would challenge you all, for your sake as designers, and to be successful is to really make sure you take a step back and you really understand the real sort of user goals, and not jump so quickly into the sort of traditional, again, I put the nav header at the top, I put the drop down here, I put the radio box here, I put the scroll, widget over here, all the stuff that we all do every day. That's fine. And there's plenty of places for that, but I would just challenge you or recommend to all of you that you take a step back from all the sort of UX norms and think more sort of user centric about your design approach. I think it'll allow you to be more successful and more unique as a designer.
That's great advice. I know we only have a couple more minutes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with the students? Or just
No, no,
Okay.
I really just wanted to say that it's an exciting field. I'm so excited that you're all in this field, and it can be a sort of a joyful and a wonderful creative, industry, and yet it's very precise and it's very technical. And I believe a lot of you come from a sort of software development background, so you have that technical side. And people are doing remarkable things. I would recommend you just experience as much as possible, because AI is doing some amazing things, because VR and AR are so powerful right now, that you will be, I think, inspired as UX people to try and experience as many things as possible. I think it's always good for us as creators and designers to get as much of that stimulation as possible.
That's great, Patrick. And so I'd like to thank you for sharing all your wisdom and expertise and experience with the Wisconsin iSchool and these young user experience designers as they embark on their journeys. And thank you so much for sharing and taking your time today.
Well, you guys, really thank you so much, and I'm really happy to be part of this. I think you guys are going to do wonderful stuff, and something I feel very passionate about. So appreciate you giving me the opportunity and to share a little bit with you.
Thanks again, Patrick. Appreciate your time.
All right, be well, everyone.
Bye.